What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be going through my top 30 Week 8 running back rankings. In my wide receiver video, I talked about how the position's really struggling. There's a ton of injuries. I feel like it's the complete opposite at the running back spot. No bye weeks this week. I feel like the running back position is in a very, very good place. A lot of quality options out there, so you may be choosing between a few guys for your RB2 spot, your flex options. So let's just dive right into the rankings here. We're going to start off in tier 1. I have 6 tier 1 running backs. We're going to go Kenneth Walker, Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon, Breece Hall, Saquon Barkley, and Kyren Williams. Starting off here with Kenneth Walker, he's averaging 22.3 PPR points per game, and he just draws a really nice matchup here against the Bills, who have allowed the second most points per game to the running back spot. So you have a running back that's already producing like a high-end RB1. You give him a nice matchup. I like Kenneth Walker here, especially with his increased receiving workload. Then I have Derrick Henry going up against the Browns. Derrick Henry has been an absolute monster. 25 plus PPR points in 4 of his last 5 games. Even with a slow start last night, still ends up, having a monster fantasy day. So locked in running back 1, high-end running back 1. And then I have Joe Mixon going up against the Colts. He's played in 3 full games this year. In those 3 games, he has put up 26.8, 27.2, and 26.4 PPR points in a game where the Texans' passing attack was non-existent. Joe Mixon is still very productive. I think he's a high-end RB1. Then going with Breece Hall here against the Patriots. This is a nice matchup here against the Patriots, who have allowed the 3rd most points per game to the running back position. And then you look at Breece Hall, had a couple of down games, a few weeks ago, but in his last 2 games, he has combined for 310 scrimmage yards. He's getting solid usage on the ground, and then is also being very, very involved as a pass catcher. So really like Breece here. Then I have Saquon going up against the Bengals. Saquon at RB5 feels low. He's averaging 22 points per game. There are just so many quality options at this point at the running back position. If you have these guys on your roster, obviously you're playing them. And then Kyren Williams, very strong usage. The touchdown upside is very there. 9 touchdowns in 6 total games. Now shifting into tier 2 here, I'm going to start off this tier with Jahmyr Gibbs going up against the Titans. Coming off his best fantasy game of the season, 32 PPR points. The Lions are number 1 in implied points this week, and I do think this is going to be a favorable game script for these running backs, both Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. They're 10.5-point favorites. I assume they're just going to be, closing this game out on the ground, which is obviously going to benefit those running backs. In between Jahmyr Gibbs and Montgomery, I have Bijan Robinson going up against the Bucks. In his last 2 games, he put up 25.5 and 23.3 PPR points. In that 25-plus point game, it was a little bit concerning because even though the usage was solid, Tyler Algier was taking a lot of opportunities. He was taking the goal line work. This past week, Bijan Robinson had 26 opportunities compared to 6 for Tyler Algier. That's a great sign. If he can maintain that type of split, he does have high-end RB1 upside rest of season. Then David Montgomery, who I mentioned, he is dealing with a knee injury, so something to monitor. But if he's good to go 100% for this game, this is a smash matchup here in a very favorable game script. And then the last guy in this tier, definitely a riser. It is going to be Kareem Hunt going up against the Raiders. In his last 2 games, he has 49 total carries. In those games, he's put up 18.7 and 22.3 PPR points. This should be a great game script here for Kareem Hunt. They're 9.5-point favorites. He's been the clear-cut RB1. I think he's a top 10 option. Now moving into tier 3, still a very, very strong tier. We're going to start off here with Chuba Hubbard, and he actually had his worst game with Andy Dalton at quarterback, but it was still 11.2 PPR points, like still a fine game. If that's worst case scenario with Andy Dalton, I still think that's a decent performance. We'll see what Jonathan Brooks' status is, but I was someone who really liked Brooks. At this point, the recovery seems to be going very, very slow. I feel like Chuba is still going to be a strong option, even if Brooks is active. Then I have Aaron Jones going up against the Rams. If we take away week 6, where he left early with that hip injury, he'd be averaging 18.6 PPR points per game on the season. He's been super productive. This Vikings offense has been very good. He's their clear-cut top running back. Like him here as a RB12. Then I have Josh Jacobs going up against the Jaguars. He's coming off his best fantasy game of the season, 20.2 PPR points, scored his first receiving touchdown of his career, so good to see that. And then it's a nice matchup here. The Jaguars have allowed the 6th most points per game to the running back position. So coming off his best performance, nice matchup. I think Josh Jacobs is a nice high-end RB2. Then I'm going to go with Devon Achane here. I'm expecting a major bounce back from this Dolphins offense. Going to be assuming that Tua is back. In the first two games with Tua, week 1, week 2, Achane was super involved as a pass catcher, 7 targets in both those games, 20 plus points in both those games. I think Achane is going to have a nice resurgence here moving forward. Then I have DeAndre Swift going up against the Commanders. The Bears are coming off a bye week, but after a rough start to the season for Swift, in his last 3 games, he has put up 20 plus points in all of them. So Swift is rolling. This Bears offense is looking better, and I don't think it's a terrible matchup here against the Commanders. Then going with Jordan Mason here against the Cowboys. Now, this 49ers offense, it's looking a little bit iffy at this point. And I do think if we look at the injuries to George Kittle, Juwan Jennings, if it seems like those guys are going to miss, then I'd probably move Jordan Mason down just based on like the entire offense not having a ton of upside. But if they can get George Kittle in there, they can get Juwan Jennings healthy. Then you look at Jordan Mason going up against this Cowboys defense, which has allowed the 4th most points per game to the running back position. I think it's a favorable matchup. I do think they're going to rely on the run here, try to get Jordan Mason cooking. So I think he's a nice option. Like I said, though, if this entire team is just destroyed by injuries and they don't have any of like their top 5-6 weapons, then I'd probably fade away from Mason just a little bit. Then I have James Conner going up against the Dolphins. It's a nice matchup. They're top 10 in points per game allowed to the running back position. He's averaging 14 points per game while only scoring 3 touchdowns. So I think there's room to improve in that touchdown department, but the usage is solid, somewhat involved as a pass catcher, decent workload on the ground, the clear Cardinals running back 1. Then I'm going with J.K. Dobbins against the Saints. Not coming off a great game in that Monday night performance, but this is a nice matchup here against the Saints. They have allowed the 5th most points per game to the running back spot. On offense, they're super banged up. We just saw Javonte Williams have by far his best game of the season against them. So I like the matchup here for Dobbins. His usage has been solid. I think this is a nice boom game for him. And then the final guy in this tier, the dude I just mentioned, Javonte Williams, going up against the Panthers. The Panthers are 1st in points per game allowed to the running back position. Javonte, like I said, coming off a huge week 7, 14 carries, 88 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. Even though I don't fully trust this Broncos offense, I don't fully trust Javonte Williams, this just seems like too juicy of a matchup to pass up on here for Javonte. Now moving into tier 4, going to start off this tier with Jonathan Taylor. Now there's no guarantee he's going to play this week. We have to, see him get back to practice, dealing with that sprained ankle. But if he does play, I still think he's playable as an RB2. Obviously, we're not quite sure what the usage is going to be. Just a situation and injury we'll have to monitor throughout the week. After JT, going with Alvin Kamara, this is tough because with Derek Carr healthy, it looked like Kamara was going to be a high-end running back 1 rest of season. In the last 2 games without Derek Carr, he's put up 17.4 and 8.4 PPR points. This Saints offense is not projected to score points. They have the 2nd fewest implied points this week, so it's just not a great spot for Kamara. I still think he's playable, and putting him down at running back 21 might seem harsh. It's really not an indictment on Kamara. It's more the situation, the matchup, and then also just the fact that the running back position is so strong that that's where he's kind of going to fall here. Then I have James Cook going up against the Seahawks. Another guy who seems somewhat low, did make his return in week 7, 12 carries, 0 targets. I think Ray Davis is going to be a little bit of a thorn in his side. Ty Johnson also kind of working in near the goal line. I think you look at a lot of these other running backs, a lot of the dudes ranked ahead of him are like the clear-cut RB1s, the workhorses of their offense. James Cook, I still think he's the running back 1, but if you have these other guys kind of eating into his opportunities, it's not like they're playing badly. Like Ray Davis, Ty Johnson, they've been productive. I'm a little bit lower on James Cook moving forward. Then I have Pollard going up against the Lions. I thought week 7 was going to be a smash spot for Tony Pollard. Didn't necessarily pan out. He draws a tough matchup here against the Lions. They have allowed the 2nd fewest points per game to the running back position. But you look at Tony Pollard, the usage has been there, 20 plus opportunities in his last 3 games. We'll see about the health of Tajay Spears, but just not the best matchup and on an offense that is pretty tough to trust. And then the last guy in this tier, it is going to be Brian Robinson Jr. going up against the Bears. The big question mark here in this matchup is just the health of Jaden Daniels. I know Mariota came in, played pretty well, but you want Jaden Daniels in there at quarterback just for the upside of this offense, especially going up against a pretty tough defense in the Chicago Bears. B-Rob has been very consistent, 10 plus points in every single matchup this season. but I do think the health of Jaden Daniels is going to dictate where he ends up. So if Jaden Daniels is back, would probably move him up at least a few spots. If he's out, might have to drop a tier. Now we're going to have a very, very small tier 5. It's just going to be Najee Harris and Chase Brown. For Najee, back-to-back strong performances. Week 6, 14 for 106 and a touchdown on the ground. Then week 7, 21 for 102 and a touchdown. Like I said, been productive in back-to-back games. Not the worst matchup here against the Giants. Not an amazing one, but I think he'll be fine. I think fringe RB2 territory is a pretty fair spot for him. And then for Chase Brown, he seems to just be like slowly pulling farther and farther away as the running back 1. In week 7, he had 17 opportunities compared to 9 for Zach Moss. So that's good to see on a good offense. Chase Brown, I think he's a nice running back 2 moving forward. This specific week, just with how stacked the position is, limited injuries, no bye weeks, he's going to be a high-end RB3 for me. And then moving into tier 6, we got to see the return of Nick Chubb. Honestly, had a better, overall workload than I thought he would have. 11 carries, 3 targets. Didn't really turn that into a ton. 11 carries for 22 yards. Did score a touchdown, and then caught one of those 3 targets for 10 yards. It's just a tough spot here against the Ravens. Not that you can't run against them, but the Browns have a very low 16.5 implied point total. Not great. This offense is not going to be good. So Nick Chubb, I think they're going to give him the valuable opportunities. I think he's going to continue to expand his workload, but right now, not viewing him as anything more than an RB3. Then I'm going to go with Ramondre Stevenson going up against the Jets. Returned from his foot injury in week 7. Didn't do a ton, but I still think he's going to be the clear-cut running back 1 here for the Patriots. Jets defense has kind of struggled to stop the run over the past couple of weeks. I think Ramondre's a nice RB3 play, especially with Drake May kind of raising the ceiling of this offense. I know it didn't really benefit Ramondre in week 7, but I do think it will moving forward. Then I have Tank Bigsby, and this might seem low for Tank coming off a monster game. ETN missed. He goes 26 carries for 118 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. I am a little bit, hesitant to launch Tank Bigsby higher up in my rankings. The first reason is that I do think Travis Etienne is going to be back, and I think a lot of people want to make the argument Tank Dell is going to be the running back 1 rest of season. He's the best running back on this roster. And that very well may be true, but the Jaguars coaching staff actually has to buy into that, and they have to then in turn give him those opportunities. After the game, Doug Peterson said that he doesn't believe a player should lose their starting spot due to injury, talking about Travis Etienne, Tank Bigsby. Now he could just be BSing, Tank Bigsby might go out, be the clear-cut running back 1 in week 8. But I also think the concerning part is that Tank Bigsby is not the guy in on third downs. He is not their receiving down back. His receiving usage has been pretty much non-existent. So if you have Travis Etienne, Dearness Johnson, who can be those pass-catching backs, game script is going to be very important for a guy like Tank. When they're leading the entire game against the Patriots, he's going to be able to rack up a ton of volume. If they're trailing like they might be in this Packers game, where they're 4.5-point underdogs, then is he going to get that usage? And if he's not involved as a pass catcher, you're kind of banking on him getting into the end zone, which he very well could, but it does, leave his floor fairly low. So I think Tank Bigsby has played incredibly well, but I do still have some concerns on what the usage is going to look like and how much we're going to see of ETN and Dearness Johnson in different types of game scripts. And then the final guy here, Rico Dowdle, going up against the 49ers. His last 3 games, he's put up 13.1, 19.4, and 10.5 PPR points. Coming off the bye, you hope the Cowboys look at this running back room, see that Rico Dowdle has been by far the most productive option, and they roll with him as the clear-cut guy moving forward. 49ers defense doesn't seem like it'd be the best matchup, but they really haven't been all that, tough at stopping opposing running backs. So I think Rico Dowdle is very playable as an RB3 flex option. But that is going to wrap it up for my top 30 running backs. A very, very stacked week at the position. Should be fun, a lot of quality plays. If you guys have any questions, drop them down below. Thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.